And we're back on Face to Face with YB Darell Leiking, and right now we're into our last segment. We're going to talk about unity government. Now, the Sabah opposition head whip, Datuk Sri Panglima Lajim Ukin, believes that the setting of the unity government in Malaysia is a good idea. What are your thoughts?
Well, all of us have different ideas of it, because what I understand of this unity government that has been brought about is it involves only parti keadilan, and that to us is already wrong. When you want to offer any unity, any form of unity, you should bring in all parties on board, all Pakatan Rakyat and the other opposition on board. In Sabah, we have Jeffrey Kitingan, who's also a member of the State Legislative Assembly and coming from Party Star. Now, we should get him on board also if you want to talk of a real unity government. But if they want to go forward, if any, on this, reforms into the system must come in. So it is not as easy as my other colleague, who's entitled to his opinion, is concerned.
Right.
Who does not want a good Malaysia? Who doesn't want a better nation and a better government? But again, we see what Prime Minister Najib is facing with his own party, with his own government. He's facing a bit of a problem. And if he brings in this talk of a unity government to distract us away from their problem, then it is wrong also.
Right.
Okay. With all fairness to Najib, he did mention there's no such thing, isn't it? He did somewhere in the internet portals, he said there was no such offer.
Right, right.
Now, but that took him a while to answer. I think it took him about 4 days or 5 days. Then he answered about this unity government. Again, I stress, unity government must involve everyone and must have the system of reforms that we want to bring to Malaysia. That's my opinion of it.
But can the opposition in Sabah come together as one, and with that, unite with BN? Can you see that happening? Because the last time I spoke to a BN assemblyman, he said that the opposition in Sabah had been in loggerheads over a few things. What's the situation now?
I don't know where this BN assemblyman got his information from, but we are not at loggerheads. We work very well together. Parti Keadilan, DAP, PAS, and including STAR. You can see the performance in the State Assembly. Unfortunately, I must bring this up. The State Assembly sitting was a one-day sitting on Monday, 19th. And they should have it longer than a day, at least for 10 days. So that is where you do not see the cohesiveness of the opposition on a one-day or half-day sitting. So you can never really gauge whether we are at loggerheads or not. In fact, they're probably very afraid that we are so cohesive and so in line and so in tandem that they do not want this performance to be seen in the assembly.
Hold on, you're saying BN is afraid of the cohesiveness
Probably
between...
they are. Because why would they hold a half-day sitting?
Oh,
It
okay.
doesn't make sense, Sean.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll go back to the issue of illegal immigrants, because when we were on a break, YB Darell and I were chatting about, a possible loophole.
Yeah.
Maybe YB, you can explain that?
No, this is a serious loophole, and I want all Malaysians to also think like us. Before I go on this, a lot of Malaysians are saying, why do they need to produce passports or identity when they enter Sabah? Now, that is required under the agreement when we formed Malaysia on September 16, 1963, 50 years ago. And the fact that you do, from Peninsula and from Sarawak, who produce their identity card when they enter Sabah, that means you also understand and respect our system in the state. Now, there is a loophole, unfortunately. When I asked in Parliament in the last sitting, I asked the Minister of Home Affairs, is there any immigration check on those who leaves Labuan and enter Sabah through the ferry to Kota Kinabalu or to from Menumbuk to Labuan to Menumbuk and Kota Kinabalu? In their reply to me, they said none. They said that sometime in July 1984, it was authorized by the then Home Minister that even foreigners who departs from Labuan to Kota Kinabalu need not produce any document to enter Sabah. That is a loophole. At the same time, when Nurul Izzah entered Sabah, likewise Tian Chua, they stopped them at the airport. Now, why is it that there are two systems to enter Sabah? One without immigration, through Labuan, and one with immigration. Now, of course, I do not encourage my fellow West Malaysians to enter Labuan and then enter Sabah via Labuan. This system ought to be checked by the current federal government and the state government, and we should have a system in place so that we can regulate who enters Sabah. Why? We want only genuine people to enter Sabah. We want to start that way if we want to talk about solving Sabah's illegal immigrant influx problem. If we can't even control people entering from Kuala Lumpur to Labuan and entering Sabah, how can you possibly control people who enter from Philippines and Indonesia? So I urge the federal government, this is their chance to show on this 50th year on the formation of Malaysia, to in place immigration check in Labuan before they depart to Kota Kinabalu.
Now, by your estimate, well, it's a bit tough to ask this estimate, but how long has the loophole been there?
Since 1984,
And
July 1984. That was the reply in Parliament. July 1984.
that loophole has been there.
Yep.
So in that time, you probably get thousands and thousands going through.
Probably. And it's sad because while we want to not the word regulate is probably a little bit draconian, but we want to know who enters Sabah. In that way, we know that that partnership that we talk about, Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsula, is maintained and is respected. After all, we want to work towards one nation. But how could we ever work as a one nation if that basic tenet of our agreement when we form Malaysia is not even respected? Let alone people in Peninsula may not even understand. Why do we talk like this? Why do we talk about Sabah, Sarawak, and Peninsula when we are all Malaysians? Yes. How can we ever feel Malaysian if the basic tenet of our agreements are not even respected? Oil, for that matter. Sabah, being the poorest state, produces the most barrels of oil daily towards the nation's economy. Yet we are the poorest state. If you go to Sabah, and Sean, myself, and so many other Sabahans working in Peninsula, always compare the condition of our roads, always compare the condition of our economy. And while we want to keep Sabah the way it is and the way people love Sabah, we must also be entitled to the development that we should have in Sabah, like basic health facilities. The hospital took 2 years to 3 years.
This hospital is in
the Queen Elizabeth, the new one.
right.
I mean the revamped one, the refurbished one, and the newly constructed one. It took 3 years, and it's already operational now after 3 years. Why did it take so long? It was not used for a number of years, and then they constructed it 3 years for 3 years again. Yeah, that's a long time.
Is it the sentiment a majority of Sabahans feel that they have been left behind?
Yes. Sorry? Yes. I believe that we have been left behind. I believe that even in terms of education, we've been left behind because they don't mention the true facts of our history in the formation of Malaysia. So how could one walk in, how could one ever feel that we are part of this nation when the basic facts have not been told to our Malaysians all over across the board in Malaysia? You'll note that the history books taught to our children does not specifically mention the formation of Malaysia, although they do a little bit in a small paragraph. But they talk more of August 31st, 1957.
So you're saying there's less emphasis on
September 16, 1963, where Malaysia began. There was no Malaysia before 16 September 1963. So, like I said, as a member of parliament from Penampang, I speak for my people in Penampang. It is not 56 years of kemerdekaan, but 50 years of the formation of Malaysia that we should seriously and really celebrate. I cannot be part of this 56 years of kemerdekaan because we were under the British then.
Right.
We were only free on August 31st, 1963 and formed Malaysia on 16 September 1963. Some people will say you're talking of the past. Yes, we need to talk of facts, and facts that should lead us to today, where we will have a new nation, where a renewed nation 50 years on. On top of that, of course, more opportunities for Sabah and our participation in the civil service, our participation in the economy must be given to us as we are entitled to. 50 years on, 50 years this September 16, 2013.
And with that, that pretty much wraps up our interview today with YB Darell Leiking.
Katawadan.
Thank you for joining us.
In Karazan, Katawadan.
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Niaga po.
I forgot. Right. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Please join us again in our next edition of Face to Face.